Hello again and welcome. Last episode, I spoke with instructional designers Paloma, Amy, and Lori about the effects of emotion on cognition and learning. Moving on, this episode, I will be continuing my conversation with them on cognitive science and learning and development, discussing the cognitive load theory. All right, great. So, Paloma, I wanted to switch over to you for a second. I wanted to ask for a little bit of your insight. Can you explain cognitive load theory and what that is and how it's applied within the learning and development world?
Yeah, sure. So, a lot of these theories have backgrounds in other theories and models, and cognitive load theory specifically builds upon a model from the 60s developed by Richard Atkinson and Richard Schifrin. I hope I'm saying his name right. That was developed in 1968. It's the information processing model. So I think to understand cognitive load theory, you really have to understand how our brain is processing information in this model developed in the late 60s. So the model talks about how it's actually a diagram of how information comes into different buckets of our memory. So we have three types of memory. Our first is our sensory memory. That's where the information passes through first. Then it passes to our working memory, where information is either rehearsed or it's rehearsed through practice, or it's rehearsed through just different experiences that are reinforcing it, or it's forgotten. And if it is rehearsed enough, then it gets passed into our long-term memory. So we have these three buckets of memory: sensory memory, working memory, long-term memory. And the cognitive load theory builds off of each of these buckets within the information processing model. It speaks to the amount of information that our working memory can hold at one time.
What you brought up about the working memory part, Paloma.
Yeah.
It's like that's what we want them to learn, and your brain can really only hold like 3 to 7 things. So if we have all those other distractions going on, so when we're thinking about instructional design, that's one of the things we have to think. This is the working memory. This is what we're trying to get across to our learner, but what else is getting in our way? So before it can move from the new material, our working memory, and go into our long-term memory, where we get that aha moment and they connect it back to something, and it begins, and you actually are getting that connection, and it's moving itself into long-term memory. We have to make sure that we're reducing the extraneous and reducing all those outside things that we can control. Obviously there's things that are going on in, especially think about now, e-learning. Somebody's got a phone going off, the doorbell's going, the dog's barking, they're trying to focus on what's going on in front of them. We can't control all that other stuff necessarily, but within the learning module, or within the learning itself, we want to make sure that we're only giving them that 3 to 7 things that they can hold on to, and trying to clear the table so they can take the time to make that connection.
So once we're receiving all the information, maybe we are, let's say you're playing volleyball, right? There's a lot going on. There's the other team playing on the other court. You're hearing all of that noise. There's people cheering. So there's all of these sensory experiences, all the sensory information that your memory is taking in, but you're very zeroed in and focused on what you're about to do, which is really to hit that volleyball and to do a specific task.
Okay, so just to clarify a little bit, just to kind of narrow it down, essentially cognitive load theory is discussing basically the load capacity of your working memory, which is the amount of information you're taking in at a given time, the memory retention of what's happening right now in front of you, how much you can process at that time, yes?
Because you hit a level of what's called cognitive dissonance. So you have to have some discomfort, obviously, in order for you to be able to learn. But you can't have the distractions, and you can't go into the overload either. So you have to reach that perfect balance of where it's the new material, it's not boring for them, so they have an engagement level, but then they're not going into the overload portion of it.
And I think when you're designing, this just goes back to why it's important to understand the level of expertise of the learners. So you understand the gap between what your learning objective is and their level of expertise, and to prevent any negative effects of being cognitively overloaded, you can really focus your design on making sure that your learning outcome is or your learning goal is a realistic goal for the level of expertise that the learners are coming into the training course with. Because when there's a really big gap between the goal of what you want them to know and the goal and what they actually know, it's a lot harder for their memory to absorb all of that new content and get to a level of expertise or to that really complex goal that you had set for them.
Well, thank you all for sharing your insights on the cognitive load theory. In our next episode, we'll be discussing interweaving and how to build on a learner's experiences. Until next time.